Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
Russell, a brand you can't trust. Russell Brand divides opinion. Some say that he is a prophet of the truth, a talented presenter, actor, and comedian, and a devout Christian, whereas others claim that he's a greater danger to young women than the human papillomavirus. How to describe Brand's life? Well, he took a jump to the left, and then a step to the right, and with his hands and his hips, he allegedly did a series of sexual crimes. There were plenty of pelvic thrusts, and it appears to have driven him somewhat insane. Also, throughout his career, he was known to dress like Dr. Frankenfurter. Some have labelled him problematic, whereas others have claimed that he's like a bonobo monkey with word-of-the-day toilet paper set loose in a TV studio. Brand has been extremely vocal about his libertine identity, his womanizing ways, and his past drug abuse. He weaves stories about these encounters and escapades into his stand-up comedy and his presenting. He's written 2 candid autobiographies and a number of self-help style tomes too. But sadly, he's mediocre in everything that he does, a jack-off of all trades, if you will. He bounces from profession to profession, like Timmy Lee in the Confessions films. And like the Confessions films, his style of sexual encounter is probably, in hindsight, not appropriate for this day and age. It has been alleged that, like hay fever, he's spent quite a lot of time spreading his seed where it isn't wanted, causing more than a little irritation, including running eyes and scratchy throats. In light of recent accusations of sexual impropriety, Brand has adopted a couple of new personas. I've not seen someone lean so violently to the right and use the church for sanctuary since Quasimodo. My attitude towards Brand has always been similar to my attitude towards syphilis. I know it exists. I'm aware that some people get it, but I want to do everything I can to avoid it. Born in 1975, a single child, Brand lived with his mother until 16 when he was kicked out for drug use. That same year, he was taken to Thailand by his ultra-macho father, who bought him a prostitute, and in an incredibly sad example of one-upmanship, got himself too. That same year, 1991, he was accepted into the Italia Conti Academy of Theatre Arts, but after a year where he was reportedly abused by a tutor, he was kicked out for drug use. But this didn't hinder him, and he proved his critics wrong in a powerful bit part in The Bill. In the year 2000, he began his career as a presenter on MTV, on Dance Floor Chart. He was pilled up and smoking crack, and his act, so to speak, consisted of annoying people on the dance floor. He would arrive on screen filled with more Molly than a John Hughes film and on more crack than a Roman standing on a mosaic floor. In 2001, he was sacked for turning up to work dressed as Osama bin Laden the day after 9/11. For some reason, he decided to do the one single thing that could actually make the tragedy worse for all involved, all the dead, all their relatives, and all those that witnessed the horrific act. But you have to admire his commitment to the bit, and by admire, I of course mean balk at the crass, insensitive, and unfunny style that would come to pepper Brand's resume. If I were to describe his presenting style, I would have to say irritating. But sometimes he shows range and becomes obnoxious. Occasionally, he will show some type of depth, in as much as he becomes deeply obnoxious. Watching him on TV is like having a seagull trapped in your tent. Brand has a tendency towards garrulous, loquacious magniloquence, which, if you didn't know, is talking a lot and the use of flowery or ornate language to make yourself seem more intelligent than you are, which most of us find vexing, nettlesome, and pestiferous. He talks like Charles Dickens writes, as if every letter gets him more money, and sadly, often it probably does, but he provides less artistry than a colouring-in book. Some people have a natural musicality to their speech. Brand's would be prog, meandering, overlong, and enjoyed far more by the person producing it than the audience. Brand performed stand-up at the Hackney Empire in the New Act of the Year final as early as the year 2000 and came fourth overall in the competition. Over the years, Brand has named Richard Pryor, Bill Hicks, Peter Cook, Lenny Bruce, Tony Hancock, Reeves and Mortimer, Eddie Izzard, Stuart Lee, Tenacious D, Eddie Murphy, and Monty Python among his comedic influences, which is baffling because all of those people are funny. Perhaps with the exception of Tenacious D. Sorry, Brent. Well, let's just say he hides his influences well. In 2002, he fronted the television show Rebrand, which was a bit like a chemically addled Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends. In the show's various episodes, he shared a bath with the homeless person that he had invited to live with him in his flat for a week. He had a romantic holiday at the seaside with an elderly lady. He had a boxing match with his father, and he wanked off a man in a pub toilet. What was incredibly clear is that Brand seeks attention like a drill sergeant. He also spent time with a young Mark Collette of the BNP, and he tried to steer him away from his far-right views, acting like a wise older teacher. He told Mark that he was clearly bright, but he was ruining himself with all this right-wing hatred, a sentiment that would come back to haunt him. In May 2002, Brand stripped naked at Piccadilly Circus during a protest, probably for good reason and definitely not to try and make the event about him. There are no small roles, only small actors, and those actors sometimes have, shall we say, small roles. Lighting, camera angles, and the cold weather can play cruel tricks, but from the photo that I have seen, Brand would need to lie face down over the toilet in order to piss. Regardless, the act exposed Brand as a bit of a peacock. Take that whichever way you prefer to interpret it. Brand objected to the arrest and made several attempts to wriggle free from the police, explaining himself by mentioning ecological Armageddon and culture without making a great deal of sense, according to news reports from the time. Anyway, he was arrested and booked for the embarrassingly minor offence. In 2002, he was also, thankfully, rejected as the part of Superhands in the UK sitcom Peep Show. Also that year, he began a radio hosting job on XFM, but was sacked for reading pornographic material on air. So in 2002, after spending many years crammed with more drugs than your local Boots the chemist, Brand went to rehab and has been clean ever since. Many took this as a positive step. Few noticed that this was perhaps an early indication of Brand's lack of commitment to any single cause. If you can't stick to something as fun as drugs, what hope do you have in anything else? Anyway, good for him. Upon his completion of rehab, he began styling himself after a Tim Burton drawing and spent a long period where he looked like a fucking paintbrush. 2003 was sparse work-wise, but he did manage to find the time to allegedly sexually assault a young woman in the Soho area, by which I mean the alleged assault took place in that particular region of London. In 2004, he began hosting Big Brother's Big Mouth, which was originally called E-Forum, and he started pestering people like a priapic puppy. Brand allegedly pursued female audience members for sex and exposed himself to a crew member on the shows E-Forum and Big Brother's Big Mouth. Production company Endemol and Channel 4 released statements of regret, saying in part, "We are sorry these women did not feel supported and protected while working on these productions, and in light of these serious allegations, we encourage them to contact us in confidence." But this was not until 2023. At the time, Channel 4 had a no-sex clause in Brand's contract, saying that he couldn't try it on with the crew or the audience. Brand apparently gleefully disregarded this clause, despite his agent assuring the TV channel before his hiring that he would be no trouble. In 2004, Brand took his first one-man show, The Confessional Better Now, to the Edinburgh Festival, giving an account of his heroin addiction. He returned the following year with a show called Eroticized Humour. He launched his first nationwide tour, Shame, in 2006, and in this, Brand drew on embarrassing incidents in his own life and the coverage about him in the tabloid press. Also in 2006, Brand became the host on MTV's chat show, One Leicester Square, which only ran for 16 episodes. Brand was also working for Channel 4 in 2006, producing the show Russell Brand's Got Issues. Sadly, though, the show was considered somewhat of a disappointment, so it morphed into the Russell Brand Show on a different day and time slot. However, this reappropriated show only lasted for 5 episodes. The BBC were also keen to throw money at Brand for some inexplicable reason, and the Russell Brand Show began in April 2006 on Radio 6, later moving to the more prestigious Radio 2. In a 2006 interview, Danny Minogue said that Brand had sexually harassed her after she appeared on his TV show. She described him as a bit of a vile predator, adding, "I certainly don't think he has cured his sex addiction." She said that Brand wouldn't take no for an answer, and throughout the whole interview, he kept making shocking remarks that I can't even repeat. But TV producers were undeterred, and that year he hosted the NME Awards, and the shabby chic senior citizen singer-songwriter Bob Geldof, who was way ahead of most people on this, decried Brand as a cunt when accepting an award. In 2007, Brand released his autobiography, My Bookie Book. The title comes from the language used by Alex and his droogs in the novel A Clockwork Orange. By sheer coincidence, the book involves a plotline where the main character rapes a teenager. I mean, Clockwork Orange has the rape of a teenager. There is no such passage in My Bookie Book. If such a passage ever existed, it was confined to the editor's bin. Also, that year, he appeared in the film St. Trinians, a film about precocious schoolgirls, and hosted the Brit Awards, surrounded by thousands of prepubescent girls. In hindsight, this may have been a poor decision. Speaking of creepy historical sex offenders who use a fake image to hide their real personalities, in 2007, on Brand's BBC Two comedy show, he called former Jim Will Fix It host Jimmy Savile and asked to meet him. Savile answered that would only happen if Brand brought along his sister, if he had one. In response, Brand joked, "I've got a personal assistant, and part of her job description is that anyone I demand she meet, greet, massages, she has to do it. She's very attractive, Jimmy." When he asked Savile what she should wear, Savile replied that he would prefer her to wear nothing. Savile was later exposed as being one of the worst and most prolific sex offenders in British history. Also that year, Brand told a young female caller, asking for advice for a theme for her 16th birthday party. "Well, I suppose you're 16. You can't really drink booze yet, or any drugs, because that's illegal. Now, you will be legally allowed to have sexual partners. I think you should theme the party around legal sex." From 2006 to 2008, Brand received 5 complaints while he was a BBC radio host and presenter of both sexual misconduct and unprofessional workplace behaviour. But during that very same time, the British tabloid The Sun saluted him as 2-time Shagger of the Year. During that time, it is rumoured, and was investigated by the BBC, that Brand had used BBC taxis to pick up his then 16-year-old girlfriend from her school and bring her to the TV studios. Brand was 31 at the time. The report noted that complaints about Brand's behaviour had been made to Leslie Douglas, the then controller of BBC Radio 2, in 2007, after Brand allegedly urinated into a bottle in full view of everyone in the BBC Radio 2 studio, and also hurled objects in fits of rage. In 2008, he and Jonathan Ross left a lewd message on Andrew Sachs' answer phone. Brand had dated the actor Andrew Sachs' granddaughter, a singer named Georgina Bailey. While Brand attempted to leave a message for Sachs, Ross shouted out, "He fucked your granddaughter!" There followed 3 more messages, including one in which Brand improvised a song about consensual, lovely sex with Bailey. The messages to Sachs included the Brand lyrics, "It was consensual," and "She wasn't menstrual," which I'm sure assuaged any concerns that her grandfather might have had. In 2008, he hosted the USA MTV Awards and afterwards received death threats, criticisms which were harsh but fair. At this point, I would describe his style as grandiose, but he would occasionally show range by becoming tiresome. On rare occasions, he would show genuine depth by being deeply, deeply tiresome. In a GQ magazine interview that year, he was quoted as saying, "I don't think for a minute that I should be the person that comes up with how we organize a new post-apocalyptic order, because I think I'd exploit it to get girls." Well, this really threw the Western world into a spin, with us presuming that Brand would have taken up this inimitable responsibility. Across the world, people steadied themselves for the now inevitable bloodshed, as various factions would have to carve out their own legacy into history. Only in the future, because this hasn't happened yet. I forget my original point. Anyway, in 2008, Brand starred in the Hollywood film Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which many people have been trying to forget ever since. I don't mean to be unnecessarily negative, but it's shit. It's fucking shit. It's fucking dismal, atrocious shit. In January 2009, Brand participated in a celebrity letter to The Independent as a supporter of the Hoping Foundation to condemn Israel's assault on Gaza and the cruel and massive loss of life of the citizens of Gaza. In February 2009, Brand and several other entertainers wrote to the Times in defense of the leaders of Baha'i faith who were on trial in Iran at the time. In April 2009, he attended the 2009 G20 London Summit protests and spoke to the press. This was the beginning of Brand's shift into left-wing politics and ideology, which was pretty fashionable at the time. In 2010, Brand starred in the alleged comedy Get Him to the Greek with rapper P. Diddy, now known to be a massive sex offender. Brand has said of Diddy, "Diddy was new to me. He looked after me. He took me on an enforced holiday to Vegas. He's a very intense man because I think he's come from nothing and now he's very, very powerful. People who do stuff like that, they're intense. Now, I like him. He's very influential. Say you don't want to do something, and Diddy does want you to do it. It's really hard not to do that thing." In 2010, he provided the voice for a character in the animated film Despicable Me, and the same year, he married the pop star Katy Perry. The following year was less of a success with the release of the simply awful remake of Arthur, which was widely panned as being not funny and a bit racist. Brand also got divorced from Katy Perry. In 2012, Brand was selected by none other than the Dalai Lama to host the Buddhist leaders' youth event in Manchester. The Dalai Lama's representatives explained that Brand was selected because he had proved the power of spirituality to effect change in his own life. I strongly suspect that this faux pas may have cost His Holiness another go-round on the wheel of incarnation. In April 2012, Brand testified in front of a parliamentary committee about drug addiction, sharing his experiences and view that drugs should be decriminalised. He said, "I'm not a legal expert. I'm saying that to a drug addict, the legal aspect is irrelevant. If you need to get drugs, you will. The criminal and legal status, I think, sends the wrong message. Being arrested isn't a lesson. It's just an administrative blip," which, to be fair, is a sensible and honest appraisal. In 2012, Brand had another crack at the talk show format with his show Brand X. The show lasted for 25 episodes. Mary McNamara of the LA Times said, "If nothing else, Brand has overestimated his own ability to riff on the news, or rather, the audience's interest in his riff." It was apparently meant to be a more radical, daring version of The Daily Show. Brand was ejected from the GQ award show on the 3rd of September 2013 after receiving the Oracle Award. In his acceptance speech, he mentioned sponsor Hugo Boss's former business making uniforms for the Gestapo. Brand said of the Nazis, "They did look fucking fantastic, let's face it," before he goose-stepped across the stage in a comical imitation of the Nazi march. On the 23rd of October 2013, Brand was interviewed by Jeremy Paxman for the BBC's Newsnight, in which he disparaged the British political system as ineffectual and encouraged the British electorate not to vote. When asked by Paxman what a revolution would look like, Brand replied, "A socialist egalitarian system based on the massive redistribution of wealth with heavy taxation of corporations. I think the very concept of profit should be hugely reduced. I say profit is a filthy word because wherever there is profit, there is also deficit." It sounds like Brand may have read a few socialist or even communist texts, although the rumour is that he merely stumbled across these concepts by accident, having grossly misunderstood, and then, with his free hand, Googled the phrase filthy pink O. Others have suggested that he mistook Karl Marx for the drug dealer and author Howard Marx, and hearing that the latter was all the rage, mistakenly read some of the former. One unconfirmed quote from Brand on the teachings of Marx stated, "Whilst I don't agree with everything he says, you can't argue with the fact that some of the one-liners in Duck Soup and Animal Crackers are amazing." When asked about his opinion on Das Kapital, it has been suggested that Brand said, "He's a brilliant rapper, but I prefer his earlier albums and mixtape stuff." In 2014, Brand published his book Revolution, advocating for a non-violent revolution against capitalism, and The Guardian called him the best thing to happen to the left in years. Some thought that this was all a little bit performative, and it was less means of production and more memes of promotion. But for a time, Brand was considered not only a darling of the left, but a potentially important figure in the strive for equality. Soon, however, he would begin a greater negative character arc than Anakin Skywalker. In 2014, an article published in Vanity Fair accused him of misogyny. That same year, former girlfriend Jordan Martin said Brand had committed sexual assault and submitted her to both physical and emotional abuse during their 6-month relationship. She accused Brand of assaulting her at the Lowry Hotel in Salford when he became angry after discovering that she had spoken to an ex-boyfriend. Brand launched his YouTube series The Trues, True News with Russell Brand, on the 27th of February 2014, in which he analyses the news truthfully, spontaneously, and with great risk to his personal freedom. In stark contrast to his current day incarnation, he mostly focused on criticising right-wing media. He compared Fox News to both ISIS and the Nazis, and he criticised the war on drugs and the rampant Islamophobia in society. At this point, he took to dressing like your mum's piss artist mate that never married, holidays in the back of her camper van, and has an affinity with nature and a collection of massively overpriced crystals. His dress code consisted of surrounding himself with more accessories than Al Capone. Bare-chested and with a smattering of dangling trinkets, he somewhat resembled a Spanish waiter from the 1980s, or perhaps the killer from The Silence of the Lambs, in the scene where he dances to Goodbye Horses. Views of his channel were regularly in the 100,000 to 300,000 range per video. In June 2014, he took part in the People's Assembly Against Austerity that attracted an estimated 50,000 people marching from the BBC office to Westminster. Brand addressed the crowd, saying, "The people of this building, the House of Commons, generally speaking, do not represent us. They represent their friends in big business. It's time for us to take back our power. Power isn't there. It is here within us. The revolution that's required isn't a revolution of radical ideas, but the implementation of ideas we already have." Shortly afterwards, Brand appeared on Newsnight again, but was interviewed by Evan Davis. On this occasion, he was asked about the 9/11 conspiracy theories and whether the attacks were perpetrated by the American government. Brand commented, "We have to remain open-minded to that kind of possibility," although this section of the interview ended with Brand stating that he did not want to talk about daft conspiracy theories. If only he'd stuck to his guns. In 2014, in December, Brand appeared on the BBC's Question Time programme, which included the UK Independence Party's then leader, Nigel Farage, as one of the other panellists. Brand called Farage a pound shop Enoch Powell on air, and the two men continued to trade insults after the programme had ended. In 2015, Brand endorsed the Labour politician Jeremy Corbyn, a man who was seen as exemplifying certain values of the political left, and would go on to become the leader of the party. In 2017, his YouTube channel pivoted again, with Brand adopting the persona of a guru, focusing on self-help and spiritual wellness. This was not as popular as his previous incarnations. Subsequently, his viewership tanked to averaging 50,000 views per episode and lower. Some videos failed to attract 10,000 watchers, which was a significant drop-off in figures and therefore attention. While filming a program with Brand in 2018 called Celebrity Roast, the comedian Catherine Ryan reportedly made remarks to Brand indicating that he was a sexual predator. These remarks were not broadcast. But soon, Brand's brand was more toxic than a deteriorating nuclear submarine. Hollywood still hired him, but you simply can't use them as a yardstick. Harvey Weinstein probably used that yardstick to sexually abuse young actresses. Early in 2019, the Sunday Times began inquiries after being made aware of numerous allegations of sexual misconduct made against Brand from several different apparent victims. At this point, he made a decision to align himself with internet weirdos on the right wing, safe in the knowledge that he could charm them with a few key phrases. This would include suspicion of the right people, for example, George Soros and Hillary Clinton. And then he could play any investigation into his alleged wrongdoing as a tax on him by the system for simply telling the truth. This was all incredibly transparent and self-serving, but there are a huge amount of credulous people in the world. So Brand moved violently to the right like scoliosis. He switched parties and would go on to make himself rich in a manner very similar to Ferdinand Marcos. This was to many a heel turn more jarring than when Shawn Michaels threw Marty Jannetty through that barbershop window. This was an about-face faster than Johan Cruyff, and like Cruyff, he left defenders looking baffled and a little embarrassed. To most, this signalled that their initial take on Brand was correct. Regardless of his apparent interest in equality, he has the integrity of a wet tissue. He has an incredible ability to go back on his previous positions and make new content, a bit like a spirograph. What this indicated most clearly was that Brand is just an opportunist. He believes in nothing but himself, and any good things that he actually did were simply the byproduct of his self-promotion. His first video, being skeptical of the COVID vaccine, got over 1 million views. His first video criticising the lockdown and saying that this was all a setup to transfer wealth got even more views. Brand started singing to the right like he was performing a quenelle. The audience lapped it up and decided that Brand was a genius. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Brand's YouTube channel underwent a huge increase in activity following his change in political direction and was accused of promoting COVID denial and conspiracy theories. According to culture reporter Lewis Chilton, his videos are usually framed with some sort of contrarian take or calling out hypocrisy in the mainstream media, and often hint at a vague, world-altering conspiracy. Essentially, Brand saw the money and lionization that could be achieved by lying to the disenfranchised thick, and so he started delivering his balls from the right, like a bowler facing a left-handed batsman. He started talking about the Great Reset conspiracy theory, and these videos got over 2 million views. Brand just feeds into the right-wing paranoia, because this was what people wanted. Rather than act like adults, they wanted to create a narrative that altered reality, and they wanted to have someone to blame. His style also changed from his soothing, quasi-hypnotic self-help claptrap, and he started shouting a lot more. He also began introducing clickbait titles like "It's starting," "It begins," "It's happening," "Why is no one stopping this?" and "This will destroy us." Oh, would that it were so. Like a synchronized swimmer, Brand keeps altering his positions to please his expanding audience. Whatever the newest right-wing talking point was, Brand had an agreeable opinion on it. He's all right-wing politics, conspiracy theories, and performative religiosity. He's very much like that lunatic Jim Caviezel. He spends his time kicking off and spinning to the right like a pirouette. He started love-bombing his audience by calling them awakening wonders and flattering them that they were smart enough to see through the propaganda that happened to be critical of their shared crackpot views, but I'm sure this is in no way significant. His formula is tried and tested. Basically, he gets people's backs up and he shifts them to the right, like some sort of evil chiropractor. I haven't seen such cynical pandering to an audience of paying customers since that Chinese zoo painted some fluffy dogs black and white and tried to pass them off as the bears. It's the same scheme as other CT influencers. Point out that systems disenfranchise people, say you are angry at the same things, scare your audience, tell them that you can be trusted, and then ask for money. In 2021, he also starts selling wellness supplements and even gold, just like Alex Jones. Brand's YouTube channel saw significant growth in popularity during this time, amassing 6.5 million subscribers and at least 1 billion views. His new weekly views rose from a low of under 500,000 in November 2020 to about 14.5 million in March of 2022. In September 2021, Brand told people attending his tour how they could bypass COVID-19 safety measures. The following month, YouTube began reviewing some of Brand's videos to see if they violated the site's COVID-19 vaccine policies. In 2022, Brand reacted to the World Health Organization's meeting on the pandemic treaty, saying, "Your democracy is fucking finished," and that the world had lapsed into a terrible technocratic globalist agenda. Early that year, Brand released a video decrying the media for allegedly ignoring the Canada convoy protest. Brand was drinking his own Kool-Aid, and his audience, far from gagging in the seizures of premature death, were fucking guzzling it down. Columnist Charlotte Linton accused Brand of following Joe Rogan down the rabbit hole of online misinformation by pandering to the anti-vaccine movement and spreading pro-Russian conspiracy theories about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for example, promoting the unfounded and false claims of US bioweapon labs in the Ukraine. Personally, I just think he saw it as financially prudent. Also, similar to Joe Rogan, his stand-up is incredibly second-rate. There's far more money in propaganda, and being witty is quite hard. Brand talked about the January 6th storming of the Capitol in the USA by right-wing nutjobs as being a setup, and he also spoke about the infamous and fake Clinton body count conspiracy. This states that the Clintons have killed dozens of political rivals. He also started interviewing and allying with awful shit people like Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Jordan Peterson. He went full Hustler magazine and proudly showed off his collection of cunts. In 2022, he signed a deal with the right-wing video platform Rumble and started Stay Free with Russell Brand, a platform where, ironically, he often asks for money. Brand has hinted at his support for both Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and also Pound Shop Enoch Powell Nigel Farage on his YouTube channel, having realised that there are pounds in that pound shop. Brand continued his tradition of going back on himself like a Mobius strip. In 2024, he attended the Republican National Convention in support of Trump. In early August of that year, he officially endorsed the fucking imbecile, anti-vax, pro-steroid, brainworm-affected conman Robert Kennedy Jr. for president. The pillock who said no vaccines are safe, who drove his ex to suicide, and who sounds like when the radio isn't tuned in properly and is in between stations. Both Brand and RFK Jr. have a long history of heroin use, though, so perhaps that's what they bonded over. At this point, his style could be described as mostly unhinged, but he often expanded his repertoire to include hysterical. Occasionally, he added a degree of measure by being measurably hysterical. In April 2023, Brand had decided that Jesus and the Almighty Lord God were finally worthy of his attention, and subsequently he was baptized in the River Thames. Previously a Buddhist, he probably reasoned that he could do that next time. Regardless, I hadn't seen such hilariously performative religiosity since the last time I watched Father Ted. On the 16th of September 2023, allegations were published from 4 women anonymously accusing Brand of sexual assaults and emotional abuse between 2006 and 2013. At the time concerned, the youngest of the women alleging sexual abuse was aged 16, which is the age of consent throughout the UK, but Brand was 31 at the time that she accused him of sexual assault. This was the girl who Brand allegedly sent taxis from the BBC to pick her up from her school. One woman alleges that Brand raped her without a condom against a wall in his Los Angeles home. She says Brand also tried to stop her leaving. She was treated at a rape crisis center on the same day, which the Times newspaper says it has confirmed via medical records. Another woman claims that Brand sexually assaulted her while she worked with him in Los Angeles. She alleges she repeatedly told Brand to get off of her, and when he eventually relented, he flipped and was super angry. She says he threatened to take legal action if she told anyone else about her allegation. On the 17th of September 2023, an allegation of sexual assault against Brand, said to have taken place in Soho, London in 2003, was also published. And on the 21st of September 2023, a woman accused Brand of exposing himself to her at the BBC's Los Angeles offices in 2008, and then laughing about it minutes later, live on his BBC radio show. Brand obviously took this as a signal for him to start baptizing people, so dressed in plain white Y-fronts as the scriptures dictate, he trotted off to the Thames again. Bear Grylls, the TV survivalist, was also in attendance, and this provided the appropriate solemn tone for such an ancient sacrament. Brand had previously hosted his Community Wellness Festival, a 3-day event where broken people pay £250 to stand in a field near to Russell Brand. In November 2023, a woman accused Brand of exposing himself and later trapping and assaulting her in a bathroom during the production of the film Arthur in 2010. She was an extra on the film and brought forth a lawsuit against him and Warner Brothers. On the 3rd of November 2023, the lawsuit was filed against Brand under New York's Adult Survivors Act, which allowed victims of sexual offences, for which the statute of limitations had lapsed, a period of 1 year to file a lawsuit. Warner Brothers Pictures and others involved in Arthur's production were also named as defendants for neglecting, aiding, and abetting misconduct by Brand on the film set. Brand reacted by blaming the Illuminati. He said, "The corporatist state and global media war against free speech is in full swing. How do I know? Take a guess," he told his listeners. He had Jimmy Dore as a guest on his first show following the accusations being made public. Dore had also been accused of sexual harassment and also moved to the right politically, and he's also obsessed with conspiracy theories. He's also not funny. Andrew Tate, the misogynist mega-influencer awaiting trial on rape and human trafficking charges in Romania, tagged Brand on Twitter and said, "Welcome to the club." Donald Trump Jr., whose father has been serially accused and found to have raped at least one woman, posted a meme on Instagram showing the former president, Brand, Tate, and Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, who also raped a woman, with the tagline, "Notice a pattern," alongside Trump Jr.'s caption, "One day they'll be coming for you. I don't believe in this much coincidence, and neither should you." I agree. I don't think for 1 second that it's a coincidence. But unlike Donny J, I fear that there is a rather more unpleasant, shall we say, connective tissue that is running non-consensually through this thread. Just to be crystal clear, Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, and Julian Assange are rapists. fuck them all. I hope they get the flesh-eating disease in their colons. In September 2024, Russell Brand prayed on stage at an event with disgraced wanker Tucker Carlson. I've not seen something so quasi-spiritual since the BBC broadcast Ghostwatch. And like Ghostwatch, he somehow managed to fool a shit ton of people. At this time, his presenting style became sanctimonious, but sometimes he would show range and become grandiose. Very occasionally, he will show some type of deep profoundness, inasmuch as he becomes profoundly sanctimonious. When Brand became incredibly religious, some of us held out hope that he was dying. But alas, it was just a grift. Many dreadful people have converted to Christianity to try and cleanse their image. General Butt-Naked, the cannibal warlord, Tex Watson of the Charles Manson family fame, Marshall Applewhite of the Heaven's Gate cult, Jim Jones of Jonestown, Fred Phelps of the Westboro Baptist Church, and of course, James Corden. Some wondered if perhaps he'd gone method and was involved in a biopic of Robert Powell, but others thought that his religious conversion was genuine and evidently on the level of Paul at Damascus. Others suspected that he was hiding behind the church like the shootout at the end of John Woo's The Killer. When I accuse Brand of religious washing, I'm not referring to ablutions. He is using the church to hide evil intent and deviancy as cynically and as effectively as the Catholic Church. He has recognized a demographic that he can use religion and charisma to sell his bullshit to like an evangelical preacher. But unfortunately, he has very likely been involved in some pretty nefarious criminal sexual acts. Also like a evangelical preacher. Anyway, suffice to say that he is using the cross to ward off attacks like Peter Cushing playing Van Helsing. Perhaps he believes that the phrase "only God can judge me" is literal. I wonder if he thinks these verses are to be taken literally. 2 Corinthians 17. You see, we are not like the many hucksters who preach for personal profit. We preach the word of God with sincerity and with Christ's authority, knowing that God is watching us. Or 2 Corinthians 13-15. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds. Or 1 Timothy 6. And constant friction between people of corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means to financial gain. Can I get an amen? In October 2024, Brand started selling a magical amulet to protect you from Wi-Fi and harmful energies. He said, "As you know, airports are places full of Wi-Fi and all sorts of evil energies. Think of all the phones out there, all of the signals, corruptible and corrupting. Luckily, I wear this magical amulet from Airs Tech that keeps me safe from all of the various signals out there." The amulet was as stylish as it was useful and a snip at only £188. And we know that the product is good because in the video, Brand is wearing a Wi-Fi microphone. And thanks to the amulet, he remains completely unscathed. In November 2024, detectives investigating allegations of offences between 2006 and 2013 sent the Crown Prosecution Service a file of evidence so that prosecutors could consider bringing charges against him. The takeaway that I have from perusing Brand's past is that everything is an act. Sadly, looking back, it is likely that even the bits that we quite liked were also fake, designed to make his public image more appealing to whoever it was that he was trying to curry favour with at that particular juncture. He uses people in everything he does for, as far as I can see, completely selfish reasons. He just manipulates people with whatever image he thinks will benefit him and his brand. The most baffling thing is the willingness of certain TV companies to either turn a blind eye to or even facilitate his atrocious behaviour. I mean, he isn't even that good at anything. One of the most disappointing aspects is how easy it is for clearly reprehensible people to use a few key phrases and manipulate an audience into loyalty, convincing them to ignore pretty clear evidence and to mash anything that doesn't fit into their own paranoid worldview. I've said this before, but the conspiracy crowd is easy. Say the right thing and they will figuratively drop their knickers for an alleged rapist. One positive takeaway is that Brand seems to be deeply unhappy. This religiosity, this almost cult leader type behavior, it all smacks of loneliness and a need to convince himself that he isn't a terrible, terrible person. He seems a deeply damaged man that simply thrives on attention. He's like the observer effect in human form. Without someone watching him, he simply does not exist.